This podcast contains mature content and listener discretion is advised.
Also, be advised, we are not medical professionals and this podcast is for entertainment purposes only.
Running through the streets, solving all the mysteries, crushes and aliens, lots of other crazy things, laughing all the way. All we know is we don't know Kayla and Maggie, breaking down conspiracies, learning all the way, searching through time and space. Kayla and Maggie, now that's done, let's crack a beer and
Welcome to Mystery Team Inc.
And we're in.
We're in. Welcome back to Mystery Team Inc.
I'm Kayla.
And I'm Maggie.
And we forgot to do that on our first episode.
Miss Ioano, in my defense,
I'm really tired.
I haven't been Hoyo in like a year.
That's true. I have no excuse. Welcome back. Thanks for your patience if this is the first one you're listening to.
Why would you be listening to
season
the
two.
first, to part 2 of the first one?
I just want to
If you're doing that, don't do that. Go listen to the other one. Don't do it. No shame.
But don't do it.
But don't do it. Just go listen to the other one. You can click. It's so easy.
It's so easy. You can even tap. Also, we're videoing this. So
It's true.
go watch it on YouTube. Does it help us if they watch it on YouTube?
I feel like it would help us grow a YouTube channel.
It certainly would. You're right. So, yeah.
Listen.
Listen.
Period. Just listen. No, we can meet you where you are. So if you like to listen on a platform, just listen there.
We'll be
It's
there.
fine. We'll be there.
And if you like to watch it, we'll also be there.
Right.
We can be in 2 places at once.
We can.
We can.
We can.
Okay, do we have any business?
Go sign up for our Patreon.
Oh, yeah.
If
we
you
have a
want
Patreon.
to. We have a Discord where we will be talking to all of our listeners who are our friends. And we will also have some other fun goodies in there.
Mm-hmm. TBD.
TBD.
TBC, to be created.
I feel like we should, when we get it up and running, we should record like a little, not like an ad for it, but just like a teaser for it and just put it in these episodes. So
Yeah, but what I'm going to do is
we can
take this also.
Yeah, that's fine. We can put that right here. Thanks, Past Us. First of all, thank you to everyone who's joined the Patreon so far. If you haven't joined the Patreon yet, here's what you have to look forward to. You get early episode access, fun bonus content featuring some of your favorite guest hosts, and my favorite part, access to the Mystery Team Discord server. If you don't know what Discord is, it's basically like a chat room where we get to hang out during new episode drops and chat directly with listeners. And it's also a place for our listeners to chat with each other and share the cool stuff you're doing. So sign up for the Patreon and come join us in the Discord server. Make friends, chat about the new episodes, old episodes. It's going to be really fun. The URL is patreon.com/mysteryteaminc. The link is in the show notes and our Instagram bio. Can't wait to see you there. Back to you, Past Us. Wow, that sounded amazing. I can't wait.
We love forethought here at Mystery Teaming. Except for sometimes when I tell people the name of the podcast, they get like really confused and they can't understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we named it before we thought people would listen to it.
Yeah, that's fair.
We named it on a road trip.
What did we talk about renaming it?
Mystery Team
Enterprises. We may need to switch it.
Brand
We are doing a
recognition.
rebrand, though.
But we can't literally change the brand.
I don't
Our
know.
LLC doesn't have ink in it.
That's what I'm saying. And in order to be technically put ink in it, we would have to be like an S Corp. So we're not going to be able to do that unless we're making like $100,000 a year off this podcast. Enterprises, however, I think we can put even if we're an LLC. So
I'll consider it.
the podcast can be called whatever we want to.
It's true. I don't hate the idea.
Should we do a vote on like Instagram? Do like an
Yes.
Instagram poll?
Yeah, we should.
Should we change our name to Mystery Team Enterprises? I just feel like we're starting it. it acts like we are growing the business in some way.
Yeah, because we've become an enterprise.
Right. Even though we're not. But like the vibe is good. It's good. The vibe is excellent.
The vibe is excellent. I don't hate that idea.
Okay. Tell us about J. Allen Hynek.
Okay. This is part 2 of the life and times of UFO skeptic turned believer Joseph Allen Hynek. When we last left our hero... Okay, my main source, let's start from the beginning.
Welcome, I'm Maggie.
My main source
We're in.
For these, and we're in. My main source is a book called The Close Encounters Man by Mark O'Connell, a book called The UFO Experience by J. Allen Hynek, and a book called The Hynek UFO Report by J. Allen Hynek. Those are my main sources. So, when we last left our hero, he was turning from skeptic to believer. The book says, suddenly, Hynek's 80% success rate at explaining away UFO reports was overshadowed by his inability to explain away the other 20%.
I love that because I love that, like, he is, like, at the forefront of his field and he is, like, the guy. And he's like, if I can't explain it, then like nobody can. Like essentially like if I can't figure it out, then we need to actually consider what else could possibly be going on here because I'm the guy.
I'm the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very cool. I love this
I'm
stuff.
the man who UFOs.
I'm the man who UFOs. God, I haven't thought about that show in a really long time. My mom talks about it a lot though. She's like just watched it.
Oh. Good.
Yeah. She's like, have you heard of Breaking Bad? It's about this guy who has cancer and makes meth. And I'm like, no, we all know. So, in January 1953, in response to the events of the Washington merry-go-round, which was a UFO flap, and a film. And a feature film. If you don't know what that is, then you're listening to the wrong episode. Please go back and listen to part 1. In response to the Washington UFO flap of 1952, I believe, the CIA formed the Robertson Panel, chaired by Director of the Defense Department's Weapons System Evaluation Group, Dr. H.P. Robertson. The panel was put together to give the definitive scientific conclusion of whether the UFO problem was worth studying. Mostly, it was analyzing...
How are we still not even have decided whether or not they should be, like, looking at this? That's crazy.
I know, it's so wild.
Because what year was Roswell? Like...
47?
We shouldn't know that.
And we might be wrong.
That's hilarious if we were wrong.
If we both said it, and you go, we shouldn't know that.
And it turns out we don't.
I'm not looking it up.
Nailed it. It's just crazy that they're like, at this point, they're like, well, we should probably get a chairman of a board we should probably get a group together to investigate whether or not we should investigate.
Can we get Johnny look into that, please?
He's so good at looking into stuff. I am going to look it up.
Okay.
This is ASMR.
Move it closer.
Oh, no, it added filmed. What year was Roswell? 47. We were right.
I was really worried.
Also, I'm going to look up, what do you call... Wait, this is ASMR.
I can't believe people let us do this.
They shouldn't. Okay, at cursory Google, there is not a word for a group of UFOs. So I would like to...
Is.
There is one?
Yeah.
What is it?
A puzzlement.
No, yeah. So I would like to submit, for the record, officially, a puzzlement as the word for group of UFOs. If you don't know what that means, go back and
you're listening to the wrong episode. I would like to say, on behalf of the record, we accept.
Great, thank you.
So the panel was put together to determine if they should study UFOs, mostly analyzing if any of them were a new type of weapon system.
Yeah,
they weren't
one
even
would
like,
think
are
that,
they aliens?
that is also important.
It's so fucking annoying.
Listen, I'm glad they found a way in for the army. Do you know what I mean? Like, They couldn't get the army on board for like, this might be the most important discovery in human history, but they could get them on board for, is it bang bang? You know, like,
will it someone else bang
will
bang?
it bang bang us? Like, is it someone else? Is it Russian bang bang?
Yes, you're absolutely
like, they found a way in. Again, you have to meet your audience where they are.
You're not going to like the conclusion that they came to.
No.
So the group recruited Ruppelt and Hynek, but they weren't brought in until the second of the 4 days. And they were not taken seriously at all, of course. They looked at 23 out of 4,400 reports received by addicts since 1947. And they concluded that UFOs were not a national security threat, but the public's interest in them was, and recommended to the CIA that the Air Force that, quote, every effort should be made to make the public lose interest in UFOs.
A cover-up.
A cover-up of a cover-up, perhaps.
Get Mr. Cover-up, comma, Johnny.
Woods, comma, L.
Mm-hmm.
So the Robertson panel suggested that Project Blue Book should have an increased budget and staff, but they should be focusing on explaining away reports. So they were like back to Grudge.
Also, I like that they didn't bring them in for the first day, and it seems like it was intentional, but I'm sure 100% it was just that same thing of like the assistants running around being like, who do we loop in on this? Like, who's
they said they would circle back.
Who's supposed to be here by EOD? Like,
I heard someone say, we'll circle back by EOD in person yesterday, and I swear my eye twitched. I feel like it's worse in email, though,
So then they were like, okay, great. We're going to put this group together, but we're just going to use them to debunk.
Yeah.
You know what they did, though, because when you bring, it's the same thing with cults. When you bring in opposition and, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like persecution, that's when you solidify a cult. Like, as soon as you bring in opposition to be like, we're going to have to shut this down, that's when you actually empower the ufologists.
Yep.
This is how you create, that's how you create a movement instead of just like a little something that gets frittered away into the footnotes of history.
Yeah, if you deny
when
it
you
too
come in
much,
and be like, we have to shut this down, that's when it starts to gain traction.
Like, oh, really? Why?
Yeah.
So they brought Hynek on. Back at Ohio State University, after the Robertson panel, Hynek recruited his student Jenny Zeidman, who we mentioned in the first episode. If you don't know who that is, you're listening to the wrong episode, as his research assistant. And together they formed what they called Project Henry, which was a little two-person operation investigating on behalf of Battelle's Project Stork that reported to Project Blue Book. And what Project Henry did was Hynek was only allowed to investigate cases specifically reported to Project Blue Book. So when people came to him with their own stories and he thought they were worth investigating, he sent them to Blue Book.
Great.
So that then they could investigate them. On October 25th, 1955, Project Stork closed up shop and released their findings in what was called Special Report Number 14. And the press release from Secretary of the Air Force Donald A. Quarles stated that, quote, no evidence of the popularly termed flying saucers was found. Then, from 1956 until 1960, Hynek worked on what was called Project Vanguard, which was led by the Naval Research Laboratory with the mission of launching the first artificial satellite into low Earth orbit. The project was part of something called the International Geophysical Year, which is the third of this very cute thing called the International Polar Year, where every 50 to 75 years, scientists from a bunch of countries agree to get together and all study the same theme all around the world.
Oh, cute.
Yeah. So this time they were studying meteorological conditions and how to track a satellite.
Cool.
And Hynek was in charge of the optical tracking program under the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory. And one of the things that came out of Project Vanguard was something called the Baker-Nunn camera, which was created by an optical engineer / astronomical camera designer by the name of Dr. James Baker and a mechanical engineer named Joseph Nunn. And they built a 20-inch aperture camera with a 30-degree field of view and a mechanized mount that could switch between still photography and tracking. It's just like a big space gimbal.
Cool.
Love. So he worked on this until 1960, and then he returned to Dearborn Observatory at Northwestern and took a position as the chairman of the astronomy department, where he continued to be an absolute gem. In addition to working at Northwestern, he was also still investigating UFOs on the side with this guy named Bill Powers on top of running the astronomy department and this thing called Project Stargazer, which was like high altitude balloon research, and it didn't work. And it was during this time that Hynek and Bill Powers met computer programmer and UFO enthusiast Jacques Vallée and formed a little think tank / club that was the beginning of something that would become known as the Invisible College, which we'll get to later. It's not as exciting as it sounds, but it's pretty cool. Then, on March 14th, 1966, at 3:50 a.m. in Dexter Township, Michigan, something else happened that would change the landscape of UFO investigation. So, Washtenaw County deputies Buford Bushrow and John Foster reported seeing strange objects in the sky while they were on patrol. This resulted in a 2.5-hour chase involving officers from 3 counties and included the Selfridge Air Force Base reporting that they were tracking strange objects over Lake Erie. Then, on March 16th, Deputy David Fitzpatrick announced that he had photographic proof of the UFOs, and the photo shows like 2 glowing streaks in the sky. Later that week, Sergeant Neil Schneider and Deputy Fitzpatrick saw top-shaped UFOs with multi-hued lights that changed intensity when the objects changed speed. Then, on March 21st at 7:30 p.m., trucker Frank Manner's dogs and cattle started going absolutely crazy in his yard, and he went outside and he saw light shining out of the swamp north of his family's field. The light bobbed up and down, changing from blue to red. He and his 18-year-old son, Ronnie, crept slowly across the field to investigate. His wife called the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department. At 9 p.m., Deputy David Fitzpatrick and Deputy Stanley McFadden arrived, and they later reported seeing a brilliant light out past the field. The next night, as a storm raged over the area, 60 miles away at Hillsdale College, Cynthia Pinky Poffenberger sat watching the storm out her dorm window. I'm imagining her wearing, what Olivia Newton-John wore in the song Sandra Dee.
Yes.
Or no, Hopelessly Devoted.
Mm-hmm.
So the storm cleared briefly, and she saw something streaking across the sky from the left, going faster than an airplane. She immediately went into the hallway and screamed, UFO! And 87 women watched from the second-story window of their dorm a radiating silver-white light coming from something shaped like a flattened football dart north, south, up, and down, and then finally settle 1,500 feet away in the school arboretum. So they called the Hillsdale County Civil Defense Director / local undertaker, William Bud Van Horn.
No. Bud, listen. No, there's no way. Talk about having a day job and a passion side hustle.
Which one is the side hustle?
Can't tell you.
Oh, God.
What was his job? He was the chief what?
County Civil Defense Director / local undertaker.
Yeah, defense director sounds like a day job.
Okay. That's what I
that
was worried
sounds like
about.
what you have to do to make the money.
To be the local undertaker?
Yeah. To support your passion of undertaking.
Oh, my God. Bud. So he called the police. He went over to the dorm. From the second floor window with all the girls, he saw, quote, an arrangement of lights in the distance between the dorm and the nearby airport beacon. Dimming and undimming, he concluded it was definitely a UFO and that it was definitely a vehicle. Hynek was called in by the Air Force to investigate, and after his investigation, he called a press conference, and he said this. It would seem to me that the association of the sightings with swamps, in these particular cases, is more than coincidence. No group of witnesses observed any craft coming to or going away from the swamps. The glow was localized there. It appears to me that all the major conditions for the appearance of swamp gas were satisfied. And that was the first time anyone had categorized a UFO sighting as swamp gas.
That's so funny, because when you said that it was in the swamp, I was like, oh no, is it? Just like Will-o'-the-Wisp, which is the same thing.
Yeah.
thought came to mind for me, too.
The chapter of the book is called Will-o'-the-Wisp.
Oh, there you go.
So this is what the book says about...
But Will-o'-the-Wisp does not go into the sky.
No, nor does it go 1,500 feet into the Arboretum.
No.
The Close Encounters man says this of the incident. U.S. Air Force's number one UFO investigator had just declared that more than 100 people in Michigan, policemen, college students, and civil defense authorities among them, the Civil Defense Authority was Bud Van Horn, just putting that out there, who I believe, not saying I don't believe him, had been duped by swamp gas. Understandably, the people of Dexter Township were outraged, and they called for their congressmen, Gerald R. Ford and Weston Vivian, to call for a congressional hearing into the Air Force's handling of the case. And surprisingly, they did. And they scheduled an open hearing on the UFO phenomenon. There were only 3 witnesses called. Secretary of the Air Force Harold D. Brown.
Wasn't even there?
No, wasn't there.
No.
J. Allen Hynek.
Great.
And this guy named Major Quintanilla, who was the head of Project Blue Book at the time and a total asshole, and he hated Hynek, like hated him. There's a whole storyline that I had to cut for time about their rivalry. So read the book. It's very good. So Secretary of the Air Force Harold D. Brown said that
None of these people were there.
No, none of them were there. So that's what the Air Force was doing. Brown said that...
You said it's a congressional hearing.
Oh, right. Sorry. My brain's not on this planet. I'm up with my puzzlement.
Where you belong.
Yeah. So Harold D. Brown said that there were 648 unexplained reports in Blue Book files, but that none of them showed evidence that UFOs were an extraterrestrial phenomenon or posed a threat to the United States. Hynek, quote, warned that complete adherence to the policy that all UFO reports had conventional explanations may turn out to be a roadblock in the pursuit of research endeavors, and called for a civilian panel of scientists to examine the UFO program critically and to determine if a major problem actually existed. And then Quintanilla got up there and was like, there are no unexplained instances of radar sightings, which is stupid because A, there were.
Yes, there are.
B, they were only, quote, explained because he was the one who decided what was explained and unexplained, and he just said they were explained.
Right.
So, the sighting and the press conference made Hynek a celebrity, but the swamp gas thing didn't look great for him. Also, this book calls him a celebrity a lot, and I don't know.
I don't know that he is.
I don't know what the book means. I mean, he's a celebrity to like us, but we're a small subset of the population, us and our ilk. So he then started having all these speaking engagements, lectures, public appearances, and then he was paid a visit from this guy called Jim McDonald, who was a professor of atmospheric physics at University of Arizona, who had seen a UFO, reported it to Blue Book, was unhappy with how they handled his case, and then used his connections to gain access to the file, found out that their orders were to debunk and explain away everything, and then showed up at Hynek's office, was like, this is bullshit. And then less than 2 months later, Hynek submitted a letter about UFOs and Project Blue Book to Science magazine publication. And it was published in October 1966. And in it, he addressed 7 popular misconceptions about UFOs. 1. Only UFO buffs report UFOs. 2. UFOs are reported by unreliable, unstable, and uneducated people. 3. UFOs are never reported by scientifically trained people. 4. UFOs are never seen at close range and are always reported vaguely. 5. The Air Force has no evidence that UFOs are extraterrestrial or represent advanced technology of any kind. 6. UFO reports are generated by publicity. And 7. UFOs have never been sighted on radar or photographed by meteor or satellite tracking cameras. He wrote, I cannot dismiss the UFO phenomenon with a shrug. The hard data cases contain frequent allusions to recurrent kinematic, geometric, and luminescent characteristics. I have begun to feel that there is a tendency in 20th century science to forget that there will be a 21st century science and indeed a 30th century science, from which vantage points from which vantage points our knowledge of the universe may appear quite different. We suffer, perhaps, from temporal provincialism, a form of arrogance that has always irritated posterity. I want that last line tattooed on me. It's so good. So, for a while now at this point, the House Armed Services Committee had been looking for universities to independently study the UFO phenomenon. And finally, no one wanted to do it. And finally, the University of Colorado became the first university to join. And Dr. Edward U. Condon, physics professor and former director of the National Bureau of Standards. I don't know what that is. Do you know what that is?
The National Bureau of Standards? Is that what the OMB became? Or what became the OMB?
No, it became the National Institute of Standards and Technology.
Oh.
Promote American innovation and industrial competitiveness.
That sounds like some 1950s America.
Yeah. So he was assigned to chair a committee that would settle the UFO issue once and for all. And this was known as the Colorado Project or the Condon Committee. The book describes it as a dream team of University of Colorado professors, including psychologists, physicists, astronomers, a meteorologist, a chemist, an electrical engineer, and a staff of impartial UFO investigators. The committee would, in effect, be taking over UFO case investigations from the Air Force for the duration of the study. The committee immediately asked to interview Hynek, who insisted they also interview Jacques Vallée. And he walked them through Project Blue Book and told them how the military rather than scientists ran it and how it was underfunded and understaffed and how many of the unexplained cases were just not even investigated and how in year-end reports, UFOs that were listed as possible aircraft or possible balloon were changed to aircraft and balloon. Hynek says that the fall of 1966, quote, was the real time I changed. I said, I'm going back and relook at this material with a different viewpoint, no longer assuming that the chances are strong that it's all a lot of junk. I'm just not going to continue to call these people liars, deluded brains, and so forth. There are people whose testimonies would be accepted in a court of law in any other context, but by what right do I have to continue to doubt their words? At this point, he wasn't investigating for the Air Force because the Condon Committee took over and also because Quintanilla didn't like him, so he wasn't given access to the Project Blue Book files.
No.
But the good news is he had a house full of thousands of UFO reports waiting to be investigated. So he looked through them with the goal of creating a system by which he could categorize UFO events. The book says, it occurred to Hynek that if he could place cases in discrete categories derived from the reliability of the witness and the nature of the sighting, then perhaps over time, patterns might begin to emerge. Then, in 1967, he published an article called The UFO Gap in the December issue of Playboy.
Sure.
Which the book says...
I get it for the articles!
The book says it became one of the most talked about articles the magazine had ever published.
Yeah.
And describes the article as ostensibly a cautionary tale about the secret efforts of the Soviet Union to crack the UFO case before the Americans did, but also Hynek used the opportunity to describe his the beginning of his work classifying UFO events. And this was his suggestion. They should, quote, analyze cases based on two qualities, the strangeness, sigma, of the event, meaning the difficulty in ascribing a simple scientific explanation for the report, and the credibility, C, of the witnesses, meaning the social and psychological standing of the person or persons reporting a UFO. If, over time, it was possible to identify high concentrations of sigma C cases, the Colorado group should focus its attention on the area in which the phenomena were occurring. I love sigma C. I love that he quantified them into variables.
Mm-hmm.
And the assistant editor of Playboy told Hynek, we seldom get this many letters about an article. Meanwhile, the Condon Committee was doing the absolute bare minimum and had decided that instead of looking through all of the backlog of Project Blue Book's unexplained cases, they would just look at whatever was reported to them until the committee ended. And It was not just it was also all over the place and like not organized. And Condon was publicly dismissive of UFOs to the point that like in 1967, it was made particularly clear that he had just decided that the final report would be that there was no value in continuing to study UFOs.
Mm-hmm.
So like the public didn't trust. When I say the public, I'm not sure who he means, who the author means, because I don't know who was like tapped into this at the time.
Just the Playboy contingency. Just the guys from... No, those guys were on board.
Yeah. Someone was paying attention. So in November of 1968, the Condon Committee issued their final report and recommended that not only Blue Book, but all Air Force study of UFOs should be shut down. Which was a bummer, but it also meant that Hynek was free of the Air Force, and he kind of went a little bit woo-woo and like started studying the psychic and the metaphysical. But he continued to take reports from people like from his home phone.
He's like us. He went rogue.
He did go rogue. He has a Patreon too. I would support his Patreon. So, hot take. So, the Condon Committee had awakened a community of academics and scientists who were very quietly pro-UFO, and they joined anonymously in on the research that Hynek and Bill Powers and Jacques Vallée were doing at their Invisible College, hence the name. The group's philosophy, as described by Powers, was, "There is something there. We don't know what it is, but there's something there. It's too widespread. There are too many cases where there are multiple witnesses to things we can't explain. Yes, people are ignorant. Yes, they misinterpret ordinary things seen under unusual circumstances and all, but there it is. They're reporting something they saw." In 1968, in the wake of the Condon Committee report, Carl Sagan proposed a symposium to discuss UFO research, and Hynek attended. There's a whole, like...
Good for Carl Sagan.
No. Listen, I love Carl Sagan, but there's a huge, like, rivalry between Carl Sagan and Hynek because Carl Sagan just, like, shat on Hynek constantly all the time. And he kept calling symposiums and then inviting Hynek and then shitting on him.
Carl Sagan is like the high school jock of this world. And
he really
Alan
is.
Hynek is like the nerd of this world.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't surprise me that he was like trying to give him swirlies or like put him in a trash can.
He was giving him debate swirlies.
Mm-hmm.
So Sagan's whole point was basically that it is massively improbable that if there were extraterrestrial intelligent species, that they would be visiting Earth, and it's improbable that there even is life on other planets because of how specific the needs for life are and how few stars provide that environment and blah, blah, blah. Basically, like opposite Fermi paradoxed.
Mm-hmm.
The book says, "It is jarring to see the man who made his name by opening the eyes of the public to the majestic immensity of the universe in his TV series Cosmos, the man perhaps best known to the world for proclaiming to us time and again that the universe was populated with billions and billions of stars, arguing vociferously and mockingly that when it came to intelligent life visiting Earth, this cosmos, his cosmos, was defined by scarcity."
Interesting.
Very interesting. Something to think about. Hynek said in his speech, "If there were some worldwide compulsion to report strange things, why are only these particular type of strange reports preferred from the infinite universe of all possible strange reports?" A good point. And then Hynek announced that he had developed a system for categorizing UFO reports, the Close Encounters system. UFO reports would be categorized in 3 subdivisions of close encounters in order of strangeness index, sigma C. Then, in 1972, Hynek published his first book, The UFO Experience, A Scientific Inquiry, and the book, Close Encounters Man, describes it. For the next few hundred pages, Hynek put his money where his mouth was, offering a full-throated rebuttal to the Condon report and a post-mortem on Blue Book. And in this book, he went into detail on the Close Encounter system, which I will tell you now. Close encounters of the first kind are in which witnesses see a UFO close enough to make out detail, but not close enough to make contact. Close encounters of the second kind include a physical effect on the environment.
Mm-hmm.
And close encounters of the third kind, witnesses see and sometimes interact with beings that appear with the UFO. Hynek wrote, These people are not merely names in a telephone book. They are flesh and blood persons who, as far as they are concerned, have had experiences as real to them as seeing a car coming down the street is to others. Then in 1973, Hynek finally got to investigate a case that had been completely ignored by the Air Force and is my personal favorite case that I have found. On June 26 of 1959, Father William Gill, who led an Anglican mission in Boyani, Papua New Guinea, had just finished eating dinner and stepped outside the mission house to see a beautifully bright Venus, but also something else, a bright light just above Venus. He estimated the height of the disk at 300 to 400 feet, with an apparent diameter of 5 inches at arm's length. He said he held out his fist and covered about half of it. Then, he says, 4 beings came out onto the deck of the ship and appeared to be, working on something. And then it went away. The next night, a native of the island, Annie Laurie Barora, ran into the mission and was like, "You gotta go outside." And he went outside where the same mothership was there, as well as 2, scout ships. And this time, the 4 beings were already outside on the deck, and his impression was that they were human. And this time, one of them...
They were on the Lido deck.
They were on the Lido deck, just trying to fucking relax.
Relax, yeah.
Then one of them, peered over the railing of the deck and, looked down at them, and Father Gill waved, and then the being waved back, and then another witness waved 2 arms, and then 2 of the other beings waved 2 of their arms, and eventually everyone was just, standing around waving their arms at each other. And then Father Gill brought out a flashlight and shone it at the ship. And the ship responded by swaying back and forth like a pendulum. I think he was waving the flashlight side to side. And then they just kept waving and kept shining light at each other. And then the ship suddenly moved closer to them. And they waved and called out for it to land. But then the beings got bored and went inside. And then it left. And that was their encounter.
Wow.
So Hynek was able to interview 6 of the original witnesses 20 years later and found their stories to be credible. And he was like, yeah, they definitely saw some shit that I can't explain. Mm-hmm. Even though he was always skeptical of close encounters of the third kind.
Yeah.
Then in 1973 and 1974, we had another UFO flap. On October 11th at 9 p.m., Calvin, Parker, and Charlie Hickson were fishing on a pier in Pascagoula, Missouri, when they suddenly heard humming sounds, and then they saw 2 flashes of bright blue light. The sound approached them, and then they saw an egg-shaped thing, 30 to 40 feet across, 10 feet tall, giving off a pulsing blue light and floating over the water 50 yards away from them. Then a door in the egg thing opened and 3 creatures floated toward them. And this is how they described them. They had torsos, heads, arms, and legs, but nothing else about them was right. Instead of hands, they appeared to have lobster claws. The feet were more like rounded stubs. Pointed cones took the place of ears and noses. The heads and necks were fused into solid units and rested between the shoulders. There were no eyes in the gray faces, and the mouths were small slits that never moved. I imagine them as pointy thumbs.
Yes, that's also what I'm saying. With lobster claws.
Yeah. Then one of them made a buzzing sound and picked up Charlie and Calvin and floated them back to the door. Calvin immediately blacked out. Charlie did not. He said that he was floated to a bright room with a spherical floating eye that emerged from the wall. And then the eye scanned him, but he didn't feel anything. And then the creatures left the room. And then 20 minutes later, they floated him back out to the ship. Or floated him back out of the ship and placed him on the dock next to Calvin, who was standing frozen with his arms outstretched, looking absolutely terrified. And then they floated back to the ship and it vanished. So Calvin remembered nothing from his time in the egg. He completely blacked out. But they called Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi to report what had happened. And the operator informed them that the Air Force no longer dealt with UFOs and they should notify their local sheriff. So 2 detectives...
Yeah, that's who's going to take over the case. Your local sheriff.
Their local sheriffs. 2 detectives were sent to pick them up. And this is what Charlie says. When they seen the fear that was in our face, and when they talked to us, they knew right then that we were serious about it. The sheriff also took them seriously, but then, as an experiment, they put the two men in a room together and left a tape recorder running and recorded the conversation that they had, and they basically were like, dude, what the fuck was that? We can't tell anyone about that because no one will believe us. We gotta go home. So before they left, they told the sheriff that they didn't want any publicity about what happened, and the sheriff said he would keep it under wraps. At this point, it was the morning, so Charlie just went to work, where he received a call from a reporter in Jackson asking about what had happened to him and Calvin, and Charlie was like, how the fuck did Johnny Longlegs find out about this? And then it
Johnny
was all
Big
over the world.
Ears.
Johnny Big Ears.
Heard everything.
Hynek was on a plane the next day. By the time he arrived, Charlie and Calvin had already spoken to, among others, UFO researcher Dr. James Harder and security personnel at Keesler Air Force Base, who had apparently changed their minds. But then they did the stupid Air Force thing where they were like, never mind, it's not a threat. We don't care. Hynek said, it's one of the most amazing stories I've ever heard. I think they're telling the truth. I think they had a genuine UFO experience. Then, on October 18th, 1973, at 11 p.m., Captain Lawrence Coyne and his crew were flying in a helicopter ambulance from Columbus, Ohio, to their home base in Cleveland. They saw a red light 90 degrees to the east, and 30 seconds later, it was converging on the helicopter at 600 knots on course for a midair collision. Coyne took the helicopter into a dive. They went from 2,500 feet to 1,700 feet. And suddenly, the red spot became a metallic cigar-shaped object, 50 to 60 feet long, with a green light coming out of the end. Coyne described it, no wings, no landing gear, no vertical or horizontal stabilizers. A dome-like affair, 12 to 15 feet in diameter, was on top of the craft. The craft hovered above them for like 10 seconds and then just flew away. And then they realized that despite the fact that Coyne was still aiming the helicopter in a nosedive, it was actually rising 1,000 feet per minute. And then he gained control of the helicopter and it was over. And that was like 2 minutes. Then on December 7th in 1973, Hynek appeared on the Dick Cavett Show on ABC alongside Charlie Hicks, Captain Coyne, astronaut James McDivitt, who had a UFO sighting on Gemini 4, and author John Wallace Spencer to talk about his book on the Bermuda Triangle, and Carl Sagan. And Hynek used his time to announce that he was founding a new scientific research organization dedicated to the study of the UFO phenomenon, the Center for UFO Studies, or CUFOS. Mm-hmm. Then Carl Sagan came on and like shot all over everyone and made fun of them. So at this point, the book describes him as like a superstar of UFO investigations. I don't know how far-reaching that was, but so CUFOS launched with, is it CUFOS?
I've always said CUFOS.
Okay, great. CUFOS launched with 22 scientists on the team, including Jacques Vallée and Fred Beckman from the Invisible College, David Saunders from the Condon Committee, Claude Poer, a French space scientist who Hynek met at NASA, and Thornton Page, the professor of astronomy at the University of Chicago, who served on the Robertson panel, along with like a bunch of other scientists. And David Saunders brought something called UFOCAT, which was a computer database of UFO cases. By the mid-1970s, Hynek was the world's preeminent UFO expert. In 1975, he published his next book, this time with Jacques Vallée, called The Edge of Reality, A Progress Report of Unidentified Flying Objects. The Close Encounters man describes this as not a book about UFOs. This was a book about what UFOs mean, both to the human race in general and to witnesses in particular. Then, in January of 1976, Hynek somehow caught wind of a little movie being made by a small-time director, Steven Spielberg. And he sent him a letter and was like, hey, looks like you stole my shit. I'll be in LA in a couple weeks. Let's talk. And Spielberg wrote back apologizing, and he said the entire creative team was reading the UFO experience as homework. And he was like, sat around and like thought of other names for the movie and then was like, fuck it, this is too good. Yeah. And paid Hynek $1,000 for the use of the term, and then $1,000 more for the rights to his stories, and then $500 a day for 3 days as a technical advisor.
Yes.
And Hynek is also in the movie.
Oh, he is?
At the end, they're like playing music with the aliens, And the aliens like come up to them, and Hynek like has this little pipe, and he like walks through the crowd and just has like a little moment with one of the aliens.
Cameo.
In 1977, the Hynek UFO report was released. And then in 1978, Hynek retired with the intention of going full-time at CUFOS. And he and his wife moved to a suburb of Phoenix, and they had this guy named Jeffrey Kay who like offered them money and then rescinded the money because he was like, I was just going to like pay for your startup funds. I'm not funding for you guys to like look at UFOs. And then in 1984, Hynek was diagnosed with prostate cancer, and while he was at the hospital for his surgery, a scan revealed a brain tumor. So he had surgery. He went back to Arizona. In early 1986, Halley's Comet appeared again, and Hynek spent his last few weeks like hitching rides with friends to watch the comet. He died on April 27th, 1986. I'm going to leave us with this quote from the Close Encounters man. One only need watch one of the ubiquitous UFO documentary programs on cable TV, or follow along with the triumphant return of Special Agents Mulder and Scully, or insert an alien gray emoji into a text message, or wonder whether one of the 7 Earth-like planets recently discovered orbiting the red star TRAPPIST-1 might harbor the life we expected to find on Mars, or count the number of times Close Encounter, Area 51, Little Green Men, or even Roswell pop up in daily conversation. Or, as this author has done, spend a few years as a volunteer UFO field investigator for an amateur UFO group, to realize that J. Allen Hynek has single-handedly brought a consciousness of the UFO phenomenon to the forefront of world culture. We may not understand its meaning or importance yet, but we are all sitting in front of that fireplace in Maine with Dr. Hynek, devouring his stories with an astonishing eagerness and willingness to believe. There is one fact about UFOs, you see, that Hynek appreciated better than anyone, and that causes so many to keep believing. It is a fact that no one can deny and no one can explain. The phenomenon persists.
The phenomenon persists. That's another shirt we need.
I know. I feel that about a lot of things in my life.
That's like the UFO version of Nevertheless, She Persisted.
Oh my God.
Like a notorious J. Allen Hynek.
Yeah. What would J. Allen Hynek do?
Yeah, that says the phenomena persists.
Wait, I really want that.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'll make this one.
Perfect.
And that is the life and times of J. Allen Hynek, my boy. Minus how he married a teenager.
Yeah, minus how he married a teenager.
But
he really is responsible, though, for like our whole cultural understanding of what UFOs are.
Yeah. It makes me, ooh.
They tried to keep him down.
They did. And he like wiggled out from under and like went to the left.
Yes.
Went to Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
If you didn't listen to part 1, you're listening to the wrong episode. Do you have anything else?
No, that was great. I'm really glad that you covered him because I feel like we talk about him in every Alien episode.
We do.
Because you have to. And so I'm glad that we got sort of like the primer.
Mm-hmm. This was the primer.
Is.
There's so much more. Please read The Close Encounters Man and the Hynek UFO Report and the UFO Experience. And
go to our Patreon.
And go to our Patreon. And
Article is an online-only furniture company. And
Blue Apron.
And Brooklinen.
And we don't know.
And stay in your lane.
And buckle the buck up.
And what kind of smooches?
Oh, God. Persistent.
Persistent, phenomenal smooches. Goodbye.
Goodbye.